The forest was breathing. Not the gentle rustle of leaves or the whisper of wind through pine, but something heavier, something that seemed to exhale mist into the cold air. The moon was a pale, cracked coin in the sky, its light struggling to pierce the skeletal branches above. Elias Ward kept his coat tight and his boots firm on the carpet of wet leaves. Somewhere beyond the fog stood the cemetery of Black Hollow, a place the villagers refused to visit after sundown. He had heard the stories in the tavern about the crypt with the frozen clock that had not chimed for over a century. But last night, for the first time in living memory, the villagers claimed they heard it toll not 12 times, but 13. They spoke of the sound carrying through the mist like a death knell, waking the dogs, and making even the hearth fires shudder in their grates. Elias didn't believe in superstition. Not really. He was a historian, and the dead stayed dead, though sometimes their stories did not. Yet the letter he'd received 3 days ago had left him restless. If you wish to know the truth of your blood, come when the raven calls. Midnight will not wait. The handwriting had been shaky, the paper brittle with age. There was no signature. Only a charcoal sketch of a black-feathered bird perched on a gravestone. The path opened into a clearing, and there it was, the cemetery, its crooked iron gate yawning open like a jaw. Stone crosses leaned under centuries of moss, and tombs crouched in the fog, as if afraid to be seen. The air was colder here. And then he saw it. The Voss crypt. It rose from the earth, like the facade of a forgotten cathedral, its arch crowned with a weathered cross. Above the door was the clock, its face cracked, but still intact, the hands fixed at 1 minute to midnight. The ironwork around the door was blackened, as though scorched. On the stone above the lintel, in curling Latin script, were the words, "When the hour strikes 13, the dead shall walk." A shadow shifted at the corner of his vision. He turned. A raven the size of a hunting hawk perched atop a tilted gravestone, its feathers glistening like oil. Its eyes caught the moonlight with an unsettling gleam. The bird tilted its head at him, then let out a single, low croak so deep it seemed to resonate in his chest. Elias felt something stir in his satchel, and pulled out the medallion he'd inherited from his late mother. The crest on its face, 2 ravens flanking a clock, was identical to the one carved into the crypt's door. The raven croaked again, and then the clock's minute hand twitched forward. The sound was faint but deliberate, a metallic tick that seemed too loud in the silence. Elias stepped closer, feeling the pull of curiosity overpower the warnings still echoing in his head from the villagers. Leave before the night takes notice. The heavy iron door of the crypt was locked, its keyhole stuffed with what looked like melted wax. He crouched to examine the plaque bolted to the door bronze, green with age engraved with a list of names, each followed by a date of death. The last entry read, Count Armand Voss -1823. No remains found. His breath came in clouds. He glanced up at the raven, which still hadn't moved. Do you know the truth, old bird? Elias whispered. The raven tilted its head again, as though considering him, and then a sound rose from deep within the forest, a long, slow creak, like a coffin lid opening. Elias turned sharply toward the sound, his pulse quickening. The mist thickened, curling around the graves as though driven by unseen hands. He lit his lantern, its small circle of light barely cutting through the gloom. The Voss crypt loomed behind him, but the rest of the graveyard seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. Moss-covered angels stared down with eyeless faces. Names eroded by centuries became unreadable whispers in the stone. Something scraped. A cross rocked to his left. Elias swung the lantern and caught sight of movement, a hunched figure, dragging a rusted spade through the mud. The man's beard was tangled with leaves, and his coat hung in tatters. His eyes glimmered unnaturally in the lamplight. "You've come too close, boy," the man rasped. "Midnight tonight will claim another soul." "I'm looking for the truth about this place," Elias said, forcing his voice steady. "About Count Voss." The man grinned, showing teeth like yellowed tombstones. "Truth? Truth lies beneath the soil, and it's better left there." The gravedigger Marcel, as Elias would later learn, shuffled past him toward the crypt, running his fingers lovingly over its stonework. "This place belongs to the dead, and they don't like to be disturbed." Elias pressed him for more, but Marcel only muttered something in a language Elias didn't recognize. Before disappearing into the fog, he spent the next hour examining the cemetery. Several mausoleums bore carvings of ravens, their beaks open as if mid-call. Candle wax pooled at their entrances, some of it still fresh. On one grave, he found a small pile of black feathers bound with twine, a charm of some kind. The wind shifted, carrying a whisper. At first, Elias thought it was the trees, but then the sound resolved into word syllables in a tongue both alien and oddly familiar. His mother had sometimes murmured similar sounds when she thought he couldn't hear. The whisper grew louder, and the raven from before was suddenly there again, perched on the edge of a cracked angel statue. The clock on the Voss crypt chimed once. The sound was so loud and close that Elias stumbled. He spun to see the hands move from 1 minute to midnight. To exactly midnight, a low moan rose from the ground at his feet. The earth shifted, and skeletal fingers thin as roots broke through the soil. The skeletal hand clawed at the air, soil tumbling from between its bones. Elias stumbled back, but the ground was splitting in several places, now cracks, spreading like spiderwebs across the graves. Lantern light flickered wildly as more hands emerged, some skeletal, others wrapped in rotted shrouds. The earth heaved, and the stench of decay filled the air. The raven shrieked overhead, a sound so sharp it pierced the mist. Elias ran toward the Voss crypt, his boots sinking into soft earth that seemed to pulse beneath him. The first of the dead was pulling itself free, a jawless skull, still wearing the remnants of a powdered wig, its fingers scraping the stone. He reached the crypt door and pounded on the iron, but his hand brushed something, an engraving he hadn't noticed before. A small raven-shaped indentation. Without thinking, Elias pressed his medallion into it. The lock clicked. The heavy door groaned open, and Elias slipped inside, shoving it closed, just as a corpse slammed against the other side. The sound of fingernails, or what was left of them, scratching against the iron made his skin crawl. Inside, the air was thick and cold. His lantern revealed a narrow chamber lined with shelves of urns and bones. At the center stood a sarcophagus carved with more raven motifs. He stepped closer, noticing that the lid had been shifted slightly, and then he heard it a ticking sound, faint but steady. Coming from beneath the sarcophagus, he pushed with all his strength until the lid slid enough for him to peer inside. There was no body. Instead, a narrow spiral staircase descended into darkness. He descended, the ticking growing louder at the bottom. An underground chamber opened before him. Gears as tall as a man turned slowly, their teeth glistening with oil. Black stones pulsed faintly within their housings. In the center stood a pedestal, upon which sat a smaller clock, its hands trembling as if alive. Beside it lay a stack of leather-bound journals. Elias opened one and began to read by lantern light. The pages were covered in Count Voss's spidery handwriting. Time is the final tyrant. To master it is to master death. The raven is my anchor, my soul tethered to its flesh. When the 13th chime sounds, I shall walk again. Elias's blood ran cold. The raven outside, the one that had been watching him, was no mere bird. It was the vessel keeping Voss's spirit bound. A deep voice echoed in the chamber, though. No one was there. You carry my blood, boy. I have waited long for you. Elias's head throbbed. Visions flickered in his mind. Voss standing in this very room a century ago, chanting as the gears turned, the raven perched upon his arm. The images shifted to Elias's mother, cradling the medallion, whispering the same strange words he'd heard earlier in the fog dot. The ticking grew faster. The clock's hands in the chamber moved to 12. The ground above rumbled. The corpses would soon be through the crypt door, and then footsteps echoed on the stair. Marcel emerged from the shadows, his eyes glowing faintly. "You were meant to come," he said. "The bloodline must continue. Help him rise." Before Elias could move, Marcel struck him across the jaw. He crumpled, dazed, as Marcel began turning the gears faster. The smaller clock's chimes began 1, 2, 3, each note sending a wave of cold through Elias's bones. 4, 5, 6, each chime was louder than the last, reverberating through the chamber, through Elias's skull. Above, the sound of splintering wood and falling stone told him the dead had breached the crypt. 7, 8, Marcel was chanting now, his voice a guttural growl. The black stones in the mechanism flared with light. The raven's cry split the air again, this time from just beyond the chamber's entrance. 9, 10, a shadow filled the stairwell. The raven stepped into the flickering lantern light, its body impossibly large now, feathers rippling as though caught in a wind. Only it could feel. 11, 12. The air turned heavy, and Elias could feel a second presence, one that was not in the room, yet pressed against every surface, seeking entry. And then the 13th chime began. The raven shuddered, its eyes burning like coals. A translucent figure began to form around it, tall, draped in a long coat, features sharp and aristocratic. Count Voss's voice rolled like thunder. "The hour is mine again." The undead shuffled into the chamber, forming a ring around the mechanism. Elias's head cleared just enough for him to remember a line from the journal. "Break the anchor, and time devours the soul." He knew what he had to do. With a surge of desperation, he snatched a loose shard of stone from the ground, the edge sharp as a blade. Marcel lunged at him, but Elias drove the shard upward into the raven's breast. The bird let out a screech that seemed to tear the air itself. Its body convulsed, feathers exploding outward in a storm of black. Voss's spectral form twisted, his expression warping from triumph to rage. "No!" The clock's hands spun wildly in reverse. The gears screamed as if alive, black stones cracking with each rotation. The undead collapsed into piles of dust, their voices fading into silence. The 13th chime reversed into 12, then 11, until finally the mechanism ground to a halt. Voss's spirit was dragged backward into the void, his voice fading into a whisper. "The hour will come again?" Elias collapsed to the ground, chest heaving. The raven's body lay still, its feathers cold now, its eyes dark. He picked up one feather. It was warm to the touch. When he finally staggered up the spiral stairs and out of the crypt, dawn was breaking. The mist was gone, and the forest stood quiet for the first time in what must have been years. He walked to the gate of the cemetery, the medallion heavy around his neck, and then he heard it, a faint metallic tick. Turned back toward the crypt. The shattered clock above the door had shifted. Its hands now rested at 1 minute to midnight.